Welcome to the INFOWARS Nightly News. It is Thursday, June 30th, 2016, and I'm Leanne McAdoo. Here's what's coming up tonight.
Tonight, the TSA talks of expanding checkpoints far beyond the terminal walls. Then, report, a Fast and Furious gun made its way into a Paris terror attack. After that, the FCC warns of new internet regulations. And the Attorney General meets with Bill Clinton, even though Hillary is under investigation. That's next.
So amid the ongoing investigation into Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server, as well as it was just hours before the release of the official Benghazi report, the Attorney General, who is overseeing that investigation, decided to meet with Hillary Clinton's husband privately and unannounced on an unmarked plane for 30 minutes this week. So, of course, everyone is in an uproar about this. Even the Democrats are saying this is a little bit fishy. Now, this was a private meeting. It took place on the west side of Sky Harbor International Airport on board a parked private plane. Of course, the Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, her office is in charge of this investigation involving Clinton's email server and, of course, the potential charges that are going to be meted down. But don't worry, she assures everyone that their conversation was just purely social in nature. They talked about golfing, they talked about grandchildren, about their vacations and stuff like that. Nothing about the elephant in the room that is Bill Clinton's wife, Hillary. Now, even the Democrats are saying, wow, this was in really bad taste. It's obviously going to raise concerns about a possible conflict of interest while his wife is under federal investigation. And of course, it doesn't give the Justice Department the appearance of independence. It makes them look like the Department of Justice straight out of 1984. And so even now you have the Democrats coming out and saying, I think she should have steered clear even of a brief, casual social meeting with the former president. Exactly, not meeting with him on a plane privately, unannounced, just totally random. And of course, Donald Trump is agreeing, and he is raking them over the coals for this, saying this was terrible, and now it's such a big story that even the liberal media is making it a big story because it's really ridiculous, especially when this came out today. The State Department has now announced that they're not going to be releasing any emails from the Clinton Foundation for 27 months. And this is because the Department of Justice filed a motion in federal court seeking a 27-month delay in producing correspondence between former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's 4 top aides and officials with the Clinton Foundation and Teneo Holdings, which is, of course, a closely allied PR firm that Bill Clinton helped launch, and Huma Abedin also worked at Teneo Holdings as well. So the Department of Justice is now going to push back the release of any emails between the Clinton Foundation and Hillary at the State Department until, if she gets elected, it'll be 22 months into her presidency. So they're pushing it back. They're totally protecting this candidate that they want to see become the next president. So the American people obviously have a right to see what's going on with the Clinton Foundation and seeing if there was any conflict of interest there. There is currently an FBI public corruption probe underway investigating whether Clinton used her position to benefit or recruit donors to the Clinton Foundation. Of course she did, but obviously these are conflicts of interest made possible by the activities of Hillary Clinton's State Department, where billions of dollars were funneled through, using it as their own little private slush fund. And now this is interesting because the State Department originally estimated that 6,000 emails and other documents were exchanged by the aides and the Clinton Foundation. But a series of errors the department told the court about on Wednesday now means the total has grown to 34,000 plus potentially responsive documents. So they were communicating with officials at the Clinton Foundation and Teneo Holdings about 700 times each month. That is a lot of emails, and this is what the people need to see. This is where the pay to play comes in. This is where we find out about her selling all the uranium production in the U.S. to the Russians and making all the bad deals for the American people with the Chinese. You know, it's not just about the fact that she set up her private email server, even though she is a federal employee there who has accountability and needs to have her emails be subject to FOIA requests, you know, as if that wasn't fishy enough. But now even the Washington Post is saying, okay, she's getting a little too hard to continually back. They say Hillary Clinton's email story continues to get harder and harder to believe. Indeed, I'm surprised it's taken them this long to finally admit that their accountability, their journalistic integrity is being questioned by constantly backing her when it's just blatantly. So on Monday night, the AP published a piece noting the release of an additional 165 pages of emails that Hillary sent from her private email address. So these were emails that hadn't been previously released, and they were only made public because of a court order in response to a FOIA request. And the only reason they were able to request this is because they were able to say, okay, well, she doesn't have an official email, but we want HRC, anything that includes Clinton mail. So they had to do a little digging and find this out because the State Department didn't provide it to them. So you'll recall that Hillary Clinton said she turned over everything to the State Department. And that was something she came right out and said. But that was just one lie that has been busted here with this latest release. So initially she said that she set up a private server out of convenience. She didn't want to have to carry all of these devices. It was purely personal. But now these emails show, she says, I've just realized I have no idea how my papers are treated at state. Who manages both my personal and official files? I think we need to get on this ASAP to be sure we know and design the system we want. That sounds a lot more like an active participant in setting up this private email server, not as if she just was listening to what her IT guys told her would be more convenient with everything. So this is a much more active agency than Clinton has previously let on. Like she said in some other emails that weren't released to the state, she wanted to make sure that her personal and work emails never got mixed up. And so it just lets people know that she was far more engaged with how it all should look to the government. And the fact that the Department of Justice is going to back her until after the election is just insane. The American people need to call them out on this. But of course, we've got the federal regulations of the internet coming our way. Now, they'll protect Hillary Clinton, but you and I, our freedom on the internet is absolutely, once again, at stake here. And this warning is actually coming from the FCC and FEC commissioners. They're saying this is so bad. Federal regulations of the internet are coming. Of course, Matt Drudge warned about this when he was here in studio. But they say the Democrats are now targeting content and control of the internet, especially from conservative sources. And they're pushing hard to layer on new regulations and even censorship under the guise of promoting diversity while policing, bullying, and other things. It's a cloud over your free speech. So we'll definitely have to pay attention to what they're working on, these new bills that they've got coming up. Now, let's give some credit where it's due. We have some U.S. airstrikes killing at least 250 ISIS fighters. Now, this was a U.S.-led coalition, a series of deadly airstrikes around the city of Fallujah in Iraq. They killed at least 250 ISIS fighters. At least 40 vehicles were destroyed. And if those numbers are confirmed, this would be among the most deadly strikes ever against the jihadist group. Trump, of course, says it's a little too late. They had the opportunity to take a whole bunch of them out when they could, but instead, they're just opening up the borders here. And Donald Trump is now warning that a lot of Syrian refugees are actually getting into the U.S. These are ISIS members. And he's saying that they're being allowed to pose as Syrian refugees. And he's saying that basically we're going to be afraid to walk outside if this situation doesn't get under control. He said that it's a very large group of people. It's only getting bigger. And if Clinton gets in, it's going to be massive. We won't even have a country anymore. And indeed, the Washington Post last week, it kind of went under the radar. They released a graphic of where the Islamic State's suspected inroads into America are. They put out this graphic of the 88 men and women around the country who have been charged in connection with the Islamic State so far. And this map is all over the place. These people are in just about every single state in the country. More on that later when Margaret Howell joins me in studio. Of course, ISIS released their own map showing all the countries that they claim that they have global influence in as well. But, you know, this is just something that we're going to have to continue to deal with as they're pushing for open borders. But we'll have gun regulations for you and I. Meanwhile, Fast and Furious can be shipping weapons, even ongoing now, to jihadis in other countries. Now, Judicial Watch has actually come out saying that a gun sold illegally off book in Phoenix made its way to the Paris terror attacks that took place last year. This was an agent from the ATF who was able to trace this gun's serial number back to Phoenix, which is, of course, the site of Operation Fast and Furious. Now, the Phoenix gun owner who the weapon was traced back to had 2 previous federal firearms violations, one for selling a weapon illegally and one for possessing an unregistered automatic weapon. But the ATF leaders were very insistent on going out of their way to keep this information under the radar. Don't upset this guy. Don't get him mad. We don't want him to go public. Why not? Was this dealer involved in Operation Fast and Furious? Now, we had Lieutenant Colonel Matt Smith-Meck on the Alex Jones show earlier this year, and he said this is absolutely ongoing, and Fast and Furious is being used to get weapons into the hands of terrorists.
What I would speculate is dovetailing on what Tosh Plumley has been on your program before and talked about. This is I think, part of a much larger international gun running operation. As a matter of fact, a person in Congress had asked me to ask this central character, this integral figure that still is trying to help the Terry family, congressional oversight, that you have a nexus between Fast and Furious, and if not Benghazi, at least the Middle East. We know from accounts from the folks who are actually involved with running these weapons. In September of 2010, weapons separate from what we call Fast and Furious were run down to Mexico, down to a town in Mexico, Caborca, actually, met with an international Middle Eastern arms dealer and en route over to the Middle East. This happened at least 3 times, again, starting in September of 2010, and I think of great import is a Moroccan DST commander. Their DST is their internal security forces. On 16 October 2010, reported to his supervisors that Fast and Furious weapons were in the Kingdom of Morocco en route to arm the rebels in Algeria. So here we have now a nexus from weapons going across the southern border into Mexico, and then from there going out to God knows where.
Wow. And I know some of the NATO sources, to Plumley and others, have said that. And then so much of what Plumley said 3-4 years ago has come out and been exactly true. We now have so many of the heroes that survived, who were on the ground, who got the sat phone calls from the State Department, from orders that no, the Secretary says stand down. And we have them now on Fox News, basically exposing what Hillary's done. And we know that there's a conduit basically fencing the guns through Mexico and then out to the Middle East. Simply amazing. And then you're breaking down intel with all your sources that it's still going on. That is mind-blowing. I mean, I know you're here talking about it. I know Breitbart's reported on some of this. What can we do as investigative journalists out there listening, myself included, to draw more attention to this? I mean, what's the bottom line narrative? I mean, this just sounds like outrageous tyranny. It's not just going to drug cartels. Now it's going to ISIS and Al-Qaeda, Stinger missiles out of Benghazi. We know that now. I mean, when I was told that by Colonel Schaefer 3-4 years ago, I couldn't believe it. I mean, he got in trouble for saying it on air. It's been turned out to be true. I mean, I believed him. It was just unbelievable. And then now we got it from all these other sources. I mean, the military knows about it. How do they get away with this?
Boy, sir, it's as Lenin said, any lie told big enough or often enough is believable. And I think people are hoping the American people just forget about it. We have a short attention span, unfortunately. But for me, it's very personal in that, Brian, besides being a Border Patrol agent, was also a former Marine. I'm a former Marine. We do not let Marines stay on the battlefield, whether it's their body or their reputation or their soul. So for me, it's personal. And what I would say, sir, is, we have made contact with Tristan Levitt at House Oversight. with Jason Foster and Senator Grassley's office. And unfortunately, and I'd like to have, certainly Kent come back in here. Those folks, the Terry family, Kent in particular, not even, getting the courtesy of return phone calls.
Amazing. Stay right there, sir, because you make a good point. You can stay longer, but Kent Terry, Brother Brian Terry's got to go in about 5 minutes. So you've heard the powerful points that Matt's made here, Colonel has made. What can you add to this? What else would you like to impart to folks about your brother, sir?
Give Brian the honor he deserves. I mean, don't shrug him off, throw him under the rug like he's some piece of dirt. And that's what this country's doing. Just not the country. Just, the Congress and senators promised my family justice, accountability. Even Elijah Cummings promised my mom. And guess what? Nothing. Nothing has happened. They don't keep in contact with us. They don't tell us nothing. It's always, every time they do call us, they want to know what we know. And it's like, I'm getting sick of it. I mean, like I said, my brother served 20 years to this country, over 20 years. And this is what he gets in return?
Well, he was doing his job too good, and that's obvious, and he is a hero, and he helped unravel so much of this, so at least the public knows. But you're right. He's like the string that'll unravel the whole sweater. That's why they want it shut down. But thank God, good ATF agents and others, and people like yourself and your family having courage, and Lieutenant Colonel Smith-Meck and others. In court of public opinion, people pretty much know what happened. But to me, it's so amazing that it's ongoing. I mean, if we just let your brother hang out there and don't stand up for him, we're all in danger. And I wish some of the public out there got how important this is. If they can get away with crimes of this magnitude, Kent, we're all in trouble. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. And another thing is, too, with all these ISIS threats and all these ISIS coming through the border, what makes you think they're not going to grab these weapons that are down in Mexico and use them on a terrorist act here, or another school shooting, or a multiple shooting?
These were the chaotic scenes as residents of a city in southeastern Venezuela went on the rampage in search of basic food items. People desperate for staples like milk, rice and flour stormed a supermarket warehouse in Guayana City.
Well, in a historic decision today, the Pentagon has announced that it's lifting a decades-old ban regarding transgender military service personnel. They can now serve freely, and this affects nearly 11. Some accounts say that it affects between 11,000 and 13,000 members that are currently transgender. Now, prior to the lifting of this ban, they were labeled as sexual deviants. They were often let go, sometimes censored, criminalized, even put in jail if they were openly serving as transgender. Ash Carter coming out and saying that this is a matter of principle. They've decided to lift this ban. Now, prior to this, there was an internal resistance to this. There were reports coming out in May in the Washington Post saying that they just weren't there yet, that they were still struggling with the decision. There was a major White House policy push to let this happen. We've seen transgender rights issues happening across the country. The DOJ actually launching suit against North Carolina specifically because of the transgender bathroom issue. The Pentagon has decided to take this head on and just lift the ban entirely. Now, this is what Peter Levine had to say. He's the Pentagon's acting personnel chief. Peter Levine said that Ash Carter remains committed to pursuing this change, but it would likely take months, not a large number of months, to finalize the details of it so that transgender military personnel can serve openly. Ash Carter went on to say in this speech that he didn't want talented people that were hardworking, that were serving with honor, to be discriminated against, which is a valid point in this, saying that they wanted to implement these changes, quote, expeditiously, because it's important that it's linked to this administration. That was the sense that you get from listening to his speech, that they want to make sure that this is a part of the Obama legacy, which it really shouldn't matter whose legacy it is, as long as people can be people and be on an equal level playing field with everybody else. So there does seem to be a major political push behind this, but the ban has been lifted as of now. Now, the numbers are that this is going to affect roughly 129 military service personnel a year. That's one account of this. People wanting to openly transition. It affects things like uniforms, bathroom usage, things like that. If someone is transgender and they want to use a different uniform, they're allowed to do so at this time. The most important element of this story, for a lot of people looking at it, Ash Carter reiterated this point. I think it's a very valid one. He said that there are bigger issues, bigger world problems going on that requires the military focus, and that he's hoping that this issue will be put to bed now that they've dealt with it. They've effectively ended this ban. Transgender personnel can now serve openly in the U.S. military, along with 18 other countries around the world that already do this. I'm Margaret Howell reporting for INFOWARS.com.
It's almost that time again when the torch is lit and all of humanity rejoices in the glory of, wait, what's this? Welcome to hell? The Independent reports emergency responders have a message for travelers arriving to the city just ahead of the $10 billion 2016 Rio Olympics. The sign reads, police and firefighters do not get paid. Whoever comes to Rio de Janeiro will not be safe. Another sign outside of the airport reads, welcome, we don't have hospitals. We just impeached our socialist president and our third world economy is tanking. And as soon as the Olympians from all over the globe started rolling in, the locals quickly moved in on them. The Guardian reports, the leader of Australia's Olympic team has called on Brazilian authorities to deploy extra security ahead of the Rio de Janeiro Games after a Paralympic champion was robbed at gunpoint while training in the host city. This is not the first alarming incident. Last month, 3 Spanish Olympic sailors were robbed at gunpoint. Also, a patient was killed and a nurse injured by stray bullets during a gunfight at Salza Aguiar Hospital, which is recommended for tourists during the games. Whose idea was this anyway? Well, Rio applied to the International Olympic Committee, or IOC, on September 7, 2007. By 2008, Rio had been put on a short list with Chicago, Madrid, and Tokyo. In 2009, the IOC assessed Rio's venues and gave the city a favorable report. On October 2, 2009, Rio was chosen as the first South American city to ever host the Olympic Games. But the money is already running out, and the Games begin on August 5th. The acting governor of Rio, Francisco Dornelles, says Rio is still waiting on an $860 million payout from the federal government to pay the police overtime that hasn't been paid in 6 weeks and finish the metro line to transport tourists to all of the Olympic venues. The Rio de Janeiro state government declared a state of emergency and warned of a total breakdown in public security, health, education, mobility, and environmental management. According to the Daily Mail, many of the venues remain unfinished, and now Olympic athletes are pulling out of Rio over the Zika virus scare and for unknown reasons.
It's the Zika virus. What assurances can you give them that it's not going to be a problem?
Well, the World Health Organization issued a study stating very clearly that Zika virus is not a threat during the winter months. So the mosquitoes, they die during the winter. It's a proved thing.
The only lab capable of handling the Olympic drug testing has been suspended by the World Anti-Doping Agency due to nonconformity. The stench of raw sewage hangs in the air over the location of the venues. Human body parts washed up on the beach where the Olympic beach volleyball games will be held. And if that wasn't bad enough, some idiota attempted to throw a bucket of water on the Olympic torch. But never mind all that. The globalist filth behind this complete disaster want to shine a spotlight on the refugee crisis, i.e., invasion. That's why this year's Olympics will feature a refugee Olympic team. 10 refugees will represent the people fleeing all of the countries the World Bank has destroyed, while over 1 million Brazilians have already fled their chaotic country to hightail it up to Obama's America. Well, it's shaping up to be as dismal a globalist fail fest as one can expect in the plastic socio-economic climate we are all facing. Perhaps we can expect some brand new events. How about random gun confiscation, hog-tying political dissidents, or maybe mass vaccination time trials? Rio 2016. Welcome to hell? John Bound for INFOWARS.com.
Like the Swedes have figured out how to stop migrant sexual attacks. That's right, Breitbart is reporting about a recent Swedish press release that's warning about groping. It's a crime. You can't hold women and touch their breasts or grab them between their legs at a concert just because their bodies are crushing against you in a crowd. So a press release announced that police intend to equip young women with wristbands with the slogan, "Don't touch me." So these are very powerful wristbands. They must be sort of like Wonder Woman's wristbands, of course, as she is repelling danger. And they say that these are going to be the things that are going to equip women. By wearing these wristbands, young women will be able to make a stand. Now, it's unclear how effective these wristbands are going to be because they're written in Swedish, and most of the migrants who are doing the raping do not read these Swedish words. And now a recent police report released last month noted that the country had the worst rates of sexual violence against women in Europe. Indeed, in 2013, it was reported that 1 in 4 Swedish women will be raped, as sexual assaults there increased by 500% as they're importing all of these migrants who are, not used to the ways of dealing with women who are, asking for it. So these bracelets are nothing more than hashtag activism come to life. Yeah. These are really going to be safe and effective. It's just that ridiculous.
أمتي قد لاح فجرا فارقب النصر المبين دولة الإسلام قامت بدماء الصادقين أمتي قد لاح فجرا فارقب النصر المبين دولة الإسلام قامت بدماء الصادقين.
Look, rape is not a joking matter. The fact that the Swedish police think that this is actually a reasonable way to stop rape from happening by giving someone a bracelet is completely and totally ridiculous. There's nothing funny about rape, but what is a serious matter is the Second Amendment. When you take people's ability away to protect themselves, then we have to resort to stupid ideas like this.
Well, Donald Trump issued a warning yesterday that active ISIS terrorists are being allowed into the United States while posing as Syrian refugees. Now, this is a scenario that we have discussed many times here at INFOWARS, and indeed, ISIS themselves had said that they are going to exploit the refugee crisis to commit global jihad. Now, joining me now is Margaret Howell. Margaret, it seems like even with this dire warning, even with just the evidence that is so blatantly in our faces, these terrorist attacks happening all over the world now, the Obama administration refuses to see this as a threat, and they keep trying to gaslight America and say, don't worry about it.
Isn't that remarkable, Leanne? So I brought some information for you tonight. The Trump statement was really powerful. He was on Bill O'Reilly last night, and he said that he believed that ISIS, they're posing as refugees entering the U.S. this way. He cautioned against it. Take a listen to what he had to say.
Groups like ISIL can't destroy us. They can't defeat us. They don't produce anything. They're not an existential threat to us.
So we heard President Obama say that ISIL is not a threat, just an existential one. Whatever the hell that means, I had to Google that one, Leanne, honestly. He's saying that they're not a threat. We've got this under control. But that's completely counter to what our own CIA director, John Brennan, had to say about this yesterday. He was commenting on the airport bombing in Istanbul. And this is what he had to say. It's particularly shocking because he's saying that ISIS is going to attack a U.S. city. He just doesn't know when or where. He said this to a Yahoo reporter. It was casually mentioned on the news today. If anybody here believes the U.S. homeland is hermetically sealed and that ISIS would not consider that, I would guard against it. Oh, really? That is so comforting, Leanne. He's basically saying that ISIS is going to attack just like they attacked Turkey. He just doesn't know when.
And not only are we not hermetically sealed, and we get it, but they are actively bringing in refugees. In fact, they're disappointed about the fact that they haven't been able to bring in as many as they said they were going to bring in.
That's absolutely right. So I'm of the belief that our State Department is funneling in thousands more than they're actually giving in that official number. You can see that across communities all across America's heartland, throughout the country. And this one article, it came out on the 7th of June, a few weeks ago, and one day, a record number, 253 in one single day. Now, that's a lot per day. We're doing that.
Yeah.
We've heard the president say that he's promised to take at least 10,000. We know that the United States has approved 4,700 Syrian refugees that are waiting to resettle, another 7,900 that are waiting for their security review, whatever that means. But we know that these refugees, they're coming from ISIS territory. They're coming from places that we can't properly vet them. So we're really not sure. And there's really no passport process with the state of Syria currently. So back to Trump's point that Syrian refugees, and ISIS has even said, we're going to use the refugee crisis as a way to enter the states, to infiltrate, and to wreak havoc.
Right. And they've kind of pointed out the fact that, you know, people are pushing back against what Donald Trump says. And even he's walked it back a little, saying, well, I just mean from territories where we have a lot of this terrorism activity going on. But even ISIS released a map supposedly showing their global influence of the countries where they have people. So we honestly do not even know where they're from. They might not even be from Syria. Maybe they're coming from France. Maybe they're coming from Germany,
correct,
Russia.
Or a state where they can easily enter the border. That's right. Typically, we see that through Canada. It's much more easy to gain a passport, a visa through Canada than it is the U.S. currently. But our State Department, they're fixing that. They're on it. They're fast tracking people through. The Washington Post, of all sites, which that tells you something if they're actually covering this. The Islamic State suspected inroads into America. They did a piece, it's 6 days old, where they actually list out people that are IS affiliates, that are IS fighters, that are IS sympathizers, that have already been arrested. Federal prosecutors have charged and arrested 88 men and women around the country. Get this, they are in every major city in the U.S. They actually list out these people that have been arrested and charged. We've got Rochester, New York, Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island, Queens, Rochester, goes on and on, California, Orange County, San Diego, Anaheim. I mean, you name it, every major city. Austin is on here, Spring, Texas, St. Louis, Missouri, Minneapolis, Buffalo, Ohio. It's everywhere. We're seeing ISIS arrests.
And these are the main, a lot of the main states where we're seeing them bringing in the refugees, and then lo and behold, this ideology is getting a hold of them, supposedly, or
they're not
did
coming
they bring
in
it
with
in?
it.
Right. They're getting radicalized once they're already here. And there's actually a story out today at the Daily Mail several weeks ago. There was a man who left to go join ISIS, and then he put out an SOS email saying, come save me, I regret this, I'm through with this evil. And this was a guy that was going to an Ivy League school. He had a good life, a good future ahead of him, but for whatever reason, he was really disillusioned, and so he wants to go and join ISIS. So it's not the State Department saying, you know, oh, well, we just need to give them jobs and give them an opportunity, and then, you know, they won't go out and do this. No, this is their ideology, and he was a little bit disillusioned once he got there and said that this is not the Islam that I grew up with, that I knew. This is something evil. And it just goes to show that people are willing to join this group based on this Islamic ideology because they take this religion very seriously, much more seriously than we think.
It's radical Islam. That's what we're talking about here. And Trump hit it on the head last night. And we've seen Hillary Clinton come out after this speech. You know, she was talking to a group in YouTube in Los Angeles. And she basically said, you're a xenophobe, you're a bigot.
All the buzzwords.
You're a racist. If you dare say, wait a second, we should vet, we should know who's coming into our country, we should understand and have proper security measures in place, especially since our own CIA director, John Brennan, is saying, look, an ISIS attack will occur on U.S. soil, similar to that which has happened in Turkey this week. We just don't know when.
Right. And of course, they issued these warnings last year for the 4th of July. They said, don't go in large crowds. So we're probably going to be seeing those same type of warnings here for this 4th of July coming up. But that's just the thing, is like they know it's going to happen. They're kind of getting us, massaging it into us that, you know, just it's going to happen. Even talking about moving TSA checkpoints to the outside of airports. And of course, Alex has been talking about this for years, saying that's what's coming next. We've already seen them moving into stadiums and things like that. But if you know that this is going to be an issue, why such a pushback to try and vet people and try to stop this from happening?
We can't close the floodgate. I mean, I'm of the belief, and I've been looking at these reports all morning to kind of have a conclusive number of whom we're letting in, from where, the amount. It's so inconclusive. It's so erratic. It's so schizophrenic, if you will. They're talking out of both sides of their mouth, and they keep saying, you know, this number, no, this number. Nobody really knows. What we do know is that there is a fast-tracked group. Now, I don't want to downplay the major humanitarian crisis that's going on with Yazidis. Yazidi Christians are being slaughtered. This particular number that I brought to you earlier of the one day, every single refugee they brought in is Muslim. And if you look at the percentage rates, it's overwhelming. We're not taking people that are being heavily persecuted, that are being, you know, dragged and raped and their husband shot in front of them. We're taking...
Specifically targeting the Yazidis and the Christians, and they're the sex slaves because they're the infidels. And why is their crisis not of importance?
We could
can make a plausible case for a refugee whose life is in imminent danger of being raped and murdered, beheaded if you don't submit as a sex slave. But you know what? We have this really special class, this really special group, and you'd think we would taper this mass influx given the fact that our own CIA, I keep going back to that because I want people to leave with this. He's saying it is going to happen. Now, the question for me is, Leanne, and I know a lot of people looking at this, is the Trojan horse, is it here? Is it too late? Have we already passed the point of no return? I'm hopeful that we haven't, but Trump's words are a caution and just a reality check for anybody looking at this who might be on the fence.
Right. And of course, we also had the former CIA director coming out and saying that it's time to do away with the political correctness, because that's actually thwarting their efforts to fight terrorism. Because and Hillary Clinton, even in the face of this, is using the PC, all the buzzwords, to frighten people into speaking out about this. Japan is actively saying we're going to go ahead and track the Muslim people that we do have here in our country, which is a very small amount of people because they protect their borders. But that's something that has been a big issue on the left. It forces people to be too afraid to speak out. So it does, it is a lot with this political correctness. And honestly, Trump has already smashed that narrative. Well, thank you very much, Margaret. And thank you all for tuning into the show tonight. If you're watching us on YouTube, be sure and hit the subscribe button. And you can also become a subscriber to PrisonPlanet.tv. Your username and password can be shared with up to 20 people at the same time, and you'll help support this operation. Thank you so much. We'll see you here again tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Central.